Citizens of the world, welcome back to another Keep Yours podcast where we try and keep a few more dollars in your pocket. Today we are continuing our series on buying a home. So if you didn't listen to the prior series on getting set up to buy a home, please go listen to that one first, or this one's probably not going to make as much sense to you. But today we are talking about the actual transaction of buying a home. And what is that transaction going to look like for us once we've gotten pre-approved for our home loan, once we found a realtor, once we found a home that we want to put an offer on. The question is, now what? How does that process work? What's entailed to get me into that home? So, the first thing that you're going to need to do is make the offer. And most states have mandatory forms for making an offer to buy real estate, whether that's commercial or residential. The states have just standardized all of these forms basically so that you don't get sold something that somebody doesn't own. That's the real intent and idea here, is that there's a process for everyone to go through so that we can run these transactions, know who owns each home, know who we're going to pay, who's paying property tax, and to put it in an offer and say this is a fair offer, this has been signed and accepted by each party, so this is how it's going to happen. So mostly mandatory forms, which makes sense in the world we live in because you can only imagine over the past 100 years how many people have gotten screwed on real estate deals. So included in the offer is the amount that we're going to buy the home for and the terms. So terms will actually dictate the process and timing of how long you have to get to close. So if you're the homeowner and you want to sell your home, typically you want to sell that home as fast as possible. And you're ready to move and you're just looking to close. You want, if somebody comes in with a bag of money for the asking price that you're asking and says, here, I'll give you this bag of cash, you sign over the deed to the home, you walk away today, it takes 1 day to do it. You would go, great, if that's the same amount of money, let's do that. Unfortunately, there's not a ton of those buyers. They do exist. They do it does happen, especially with retired people buying homes where they've sold a home in a more expensive market. If you sold your home in San Francisco and you move over to Nevada, you're probably going to pay cash for your home and have a lot of money left over if you bought that home in California a long time ago. But for most offers, the terms are going to include, and even cash offers, because you're going to make a cash offer, that means that you're ready to close. It's not relying on a bank loan. But you're still going to, most likely, if you're a practical person, you're still going to want to have an appraisal done to make sure you're not overpaying. And you're going to want to have an inspection done to make sure that there's not significantly things wrong with the home. If you walk in and pay somebody cash for their home and you sign the deed and you walk away, just like when you're buying a car from somebody, if you give them the money and you drive away with that car, whatever happens tomorrow is your problem because you're now the owner. So if the foundation on the home is wrong, if the roof needs to be replaced, if these are things you didn't know, too bad. It's your problem. So this is why banks aren't going to deal with that, because if that's the major problem that's going to happen, then a bank doesn't want to lend you money on a home that might not be worth what you're paying for it, and then you default. So typically included is the timeline. And the buyer may have requirements that may take some time. So when the market's not hot and there's not a lot of people buying and moving, and it's not easy to do, then sometimes if you're the buyer, you say, okay, we're moving. My job moved me from San Diego to Denver. And I need to sell my house in San Diego to get the money so that I can afford to buy your house in Colorado. So it's possible there's a offer from the buyer, but the buyer says, first I have to sell my prior home. And the seller may say, okay, but you have to do that within 4 months, 6 months, 3 months, 2 months. It's up to you guys to negotiate how it needs to happen. So just like any negotiation, the buyer wants certain things, the seller wants certain things. The seller, if they want to move out of their home immediately, then they're not going to accept an offer from somebody who says, I need to sell my home and I don't know how long that's going to take. if there's other offers. If there's no other offers, then you might take that offer. So this is where supply and demand factors in a lot. This is also one of the areas where your real estate agent needs to be helping you. The real estate agent is going to tell you how hot this market is, if your offer is likely to get accepted, or is somebody else going to come in who doesn't have the same requirements you do. If there's two offers for a home, if I'm selling my home and you want to buy it and somebody else wants to buy it, and you both make me an offer, and your offer comes in and you say, I want to buy your home, but I have to sell mine first. And the other guy comes in and goes, I'm here to pay cash. All we have to do is get the inspection and appraisal done, and we can close in 3 weeks. Which offer am I taking? If the price is the same, I might even take the cash offer if the price is a little bit less, because the odds that it gets to close and the odds that I get my money in that timeline go up. So that's actually a really positive motivator for me if I'm the seller. Now, if nobody's making any offers on my home and I still want to sell it, then I might say, okay, well, this one might take 4 to 6 months, but it's the only offer, so I'm going to accept it. Market conditions will determine what a seller's going to do. If there's lots of buyers, the seller's not going to give you anything. If there's no buyers, then the seller will do all sorts of things if they need to get out of it. And the other question on that is always, who's the seller? If the seller's an individual, then they'll probably wait longer to find the right deal for them. If the seller is a bank and the bank's trying to get it off their balance sheet, you might get a better deal if you can close faster. For example, and this is a commercial real estate transaction that happened, not a residential one, but it's all the same type of transactions. When I bought a commercial building as a small owner in it, I bought about 15% of it. But we were buying it from a bank who had bought it from another bank out of foreclosure. So the previous tenants had not paid the mortgage, couldn't afford it, walked away, declared bankruptcy. The bank that they'd borrowed the money from, it went under. And when a bank goes under, then the feds come in and take it over, and they sell the assets to other banks. Well, the bank that we were now buying it from, who now owned it, wanted to close the deal very quickly because they wanted it in. We were looking in November we started this, and they wanted to close before the end of the year. And they said, if you close before the end of the year, we can give you a bigger discount. And so we went through, sped up inspections, sped up appraisals, did everything we could to get everything lined out and closed because that's what the seller wanted. So sometimes you can get a better deal by coming in with an offer that's more advantageous to the seller. Sometimes, if you're putting 3.5% down, you don't have a lot of options. If you only have 3.5% down, you're not going to put in a higher price on the offer. If you're in a hot market, it might be hard to find a place. I literally have a friend who 3 years ago sold his house in 2 hours. So literally they put it on the market at 9 a.m. They had 8 offers by 11 a.m., picked the one that they wanted, sold the house. They were going to buy the house that they wanted to move into, and they wanted to move neighborhoods for their kids in school. They bought a house without ever walking into it because the market was so hot you had to put in an offer above market value, pay the difference without ever seeing the home. Otherwise, you weren't going to get a home. That's how crazy the market got. Buying in the kind of those crazy frenzied markets always frightens me. I'm not a big fan of it. So the offer is the state form. It's going to contain all the terms of what you need to get done. Most transactions are pretty straightforward. Most transactions will say the buyer's going to get financed for a loan. They have if you're pre-approved, they'll note that. They have pre-approval. Anything that makes you look good to the buyer, your real estate agent's going to put in the form. They're pre-approved. All we need to do is get the inspection done and the appraisal done, and we're done. And we can get to close. But the more financial flexibility you have as a buyer, the more power you have in that situation to negotiate terms. So the standard subject to provisions, as I said, that could be a subject to, I got to sell our home first. I haven't seen that as much recently. So the more standard subject to provisions are usually appraisal and inspection. And that's because these are pretty much required by every bank anywhere before they're going to loan people money. The type of financing is included to give that information to the seller. And as I explained, that information to the seller is really an indication of how likely it is to close. And typically the real estate agents will talk amongst themselves, right? So one thing's written in the contract, and on the other side, the real estate agents are having a conversation. And your real estate agent is talking to the other agent saying, hey, these guys are serious. They're going to close. We'll get this deal done. I think it'll appraise. They'll talk about appraisal. They'll talk about, loan amounts, and they'll talk about other offers. And if your real estate agent's good, they're going to understand. They might not get the information directly because they can't necessarily just say, here's what all the other offers are. But they can get a feel for what's going on with that house. And of course, if you're the one selling it, you want to get the highest price you can. Well, how do you get the highest price you can? You make everyone feel like, oh, yeah, we just had 3 people in to buy it. Happens right now. They're right in behind you. We're showing it to you right now, and at 10 a.m. and at 10:30, there's another couple coming in to look at it, and at 11, we have another one, and at 11:30, another one. And you go, wow, there's a lot of demand for this piece of real estate we're looking at. We better get our offer in immediately. That could all be lies, or it could all be true. I said I've seen in the last 10 years the market go from you can't get anyone to look at your house to you can sell it in an hour, which is really wild to see the difference. And depending on which of those markets you walked into, you have or don't have a lot of leverage as a buyer or a seller. It just depends on which side of the table you're on. So the offer details. What's a cash offer? A cash offer typically means that the person buying it has the money available. It doesn't mean that all of it will be coming out of cash. A lot of times, let's say they're going to put 50% down. They'll just say it's cash offer because for a bank to finance 50%, the odds that loan doesn't go through are pretty small. The risk that the seller has in accepting your offer, like let's say you're putting the 3.5% down offer. What happens if they call to confirm that you still work at the company you're at and you got laid off the day before? That deal doesn't close. But a retiring couple who has the cash because they're moving from California, they just sold their house for $2 million and they're buying one that cost $500,000, that deal's going to close. They're going to take that offer over your offer if you're the 3.5% person, just because it's less for them to worry about. They can be more confident in the transaction. So that's what a lot of this comes down to. It comes down to how confident is the seller going to be with you, the buyer, making the offer to purchase. The more the contract reads to them, high confidence level, the more likely they are to accept your offer. Again, depending on circumstance. If there are no other offers, they're probably going to accept your offer. So these are just things to know, things to consider when you're making the offer. And this is what your real estate agent is really getting paid for. So know that that's the case, that, hey, if somebody else puts in an all cash offer and you're putting it and you require a loan, they're likely going to take the cash offer. So how do we deal with that? Suppose you really want this home. Suppose you've looked through 100 homes and this is the one that you want. And it's this. You're putting in the same offer and someone else is making a cash offer. You might have to increase your offer. This is how supply and demand works with who's buying what, if that's the place that you want. Now, is that within your budget? If it's not within your budget, then it's not within your budget. So you're not in that game, right? Because this is the game that you can play in if you have more financial flexibility, if you have more money saved. Or maybe you can. Maybe you were ready to put 20% down. Now you need to increase the offer, which means you have to pay that out because the bank's not going to loan you the difference. So maybe you would decrease it to a 15% with the bank in terms of what you're going to put down, and the other money you use to get the deal done for you. These are options of flexibility. If you're putting the 3.5% down, you have very little flexibility. But if you've gone through the pre-approval process, that's at least a good step. So I'm just trying to share some of the back and forth of each side. If you're the seller, if you're the buyer, how this looks on trying to get a transaction done. Now, obviously, if you're the buyer and you want that house, you're trying to get that transaction done. So how do you show that to the seller? This is what your real estate agent's supposed to do for you. So one form, lots of options, but in almost every state, it's going to be a standard form. So ask questions of your real estate agent about every single thing on that form that you do not understand to make sure you understand the requirements of the transaction. Sometimes, if you want your offer accepted, they'll say, hey, you have to put up money. When I bought my home, I put up $50,000, subject to appraisal and inspection, but not subject to me getting financing. So if the appraisal comes out and it's worth as much as the selling price, and the inspection doesn't show any problems, and I can't get financed, I could lose that. And they call that earnest money. And that's basically the incentive of you, the buyer, to get the deal closed, where the seller gets that money if they don't close. So if you put up that money, which is another way to try and get a deal done, right, then that earnest money could go away. Now, typically you can find something in the inspection where you can say, this has to be fixed, or I'm walking away and here's what I want. And you can find something to fight over to get you legally out of it. Say that I want the furnace replaced. I want the chimney swept. I want the roof redone. I want. And you can play that game. But if it comes to that, that's typically what will end up happening. Is sometimes people lose their earnest money, though, and especially if it's not a lot, especially if it's $2,000, $3,000 of earnest money that says, hey, and that earnest money could go away if the deal doesn't close for any reason. So it just depends on what you put in that contract. So make sure you understand that contract and what's written in it. And again, it's a state form, so it's not like it's a secret form. I'll put the Colorado one up. You can go find the state one. All you have to do is Google it. It's from the state office. So it's a mandatory form that all the real estate agents have to use. That's what has to be submitted for it to be a Colorado approved contract. Or typically any other state's the same. So as I've been discussing throughout, supply and demand dictate what the terms of your agreement are going to be, and may determine what you have to do on either side to either sell it or to buy it. So that's the upfront negotiation of, hey, what am I offering? Are people coming in? Is there 20 people looking at this house? Or am I the only person that's been in here in 2 months? Well, that's going to change how much my offer is, isn't it? Now, you've made the offer. The offer's been accepted. So basically, you have a contract to purchase. And the seller has a contract to sell. Subject to, right? So what are the keys to getting your keys if you're the buyer? So getting to close. Now, this is what everybody wants. Real estate agents don't get paid if the deal doesn't close. The bank doesn't get to fund the mortgage, which means all their time's wasted. You don't get the house that you want, which means your time's wasted. And this happens. And if you're not comfortable any step along the process and you want out, get out. Because if you don't like the deal, then don't do the deal. That's true pretty much anytime, anywhere about any deal. If you're not comfortable with it, then walk away. That doesn't mean that it's not a good deal. But if you're not comfortable with it, then don't do it. So first, we're going to go through the appraisal. So this is, if you're borrowing money in any way, shape, or form, the appraisal is pretty much mandatory. Once you get under borrowing half of home value, then sometimes they don't require it. And they're getting more and more comfortable with homes under $200,000 for basically it to be a drive-by appraisal, which basically means they can get on Zillow and Google Maps and look at the neighborhood and go, yeah, it's probably worth $200,000. Okay, good enough, close enough. We don't have to send somebody in to look at it. But typically, they're going to send somebody in to look at it. And that's a cost that you as the buyer typically have to pay up front. Meaning you're going to pay for it out of your own bank account via the bank. So the bank's going to pay directly to the appraiser, and you're going to pay the bank. And the bank's usually going to collect that money before they even hire the appraiser. So you decided you put a contract on this house. The bank that you have the mortgage with says, great, we have a list of appraisers in the neighborhood. We send that out for quote. Whichever one comes back the lowest, typically, they take the lowest one and they collect that money from you, and then they hire them. So you need to have that money available and ready so you can speed up this process and get them there. Because that doesn't mean the appraiser is available the next day. It's when are they going to be next available? And you want to get yourself in the queue so you keep this process rolling. Because I'm under the assumption here that you want to buy this house. So you're going to pay for this appraisal. The weird thing about appraisals is that typically, and I'm not sure if this is the case in all states, but I know it is the state in Colorado, that the appraiser gets a copy of the contract for the purchase. So they know how much you're offering to buy the house for. And the bank wants the appraiser to tell them what that house is worth so that they don't loan you more money than the value of the home. And normally they want it, on a traditional loan, they want you to put 20% down payment so that the odds that the house value has to drop 20%. And not just really drop 20% for a bank to lose money. So let's understand why a bank wants an appraisal. So let's just say you're going to buy the home and you have 20% to put down. And the home costs $200,000. So you're going to give the bank $40,000 when you close. We think, okay, now the home has to go down 20% in value for the bank to lose money. But that's not really true. So let's say you made 5 payments and then you lost your job, your spouse left you, you can't afford to make the payments anymore, so you know you're going to default on the loan. And if you put 20% down, the first thing you're going to try and do is sell the house because you've got a good amount of down payment money in there. You've got $40,000 invested in this house. Let's sell it. If I can sell it for $200,000 again, I'll at least get my $40,000 out minus my 6% transaction fee, right? So I got to pay 6%. So $12,000 of that $40,000 is gone immediately. That's true if you sell it. It's also true if the bank sells it. So it doesn't have to go down 20% for the bank to get closer to losing their money. Because again, 6% already off the table. So now all of a sudden, your $40,000 in 5 months, you just turned into $28,000 if you can sell it at the same price. Not exactly the deal you were looking for, to lose a big chunk of your money right away. So you just didn't lose the 6%. You lost 6% of the home value, which $12,000 out of your $40,000 down payment, that's almost a third. That's like 29%. That's a lot. So you lost 29% in 5 months on a deal. Boom. Right? That's when leverage is working against you. So the bank wants to protect itself from if you just walk away. So let's say you put 3.5% down, made payments for 5 months. Are you going to sell that home? No, because there's nothing left for you when it's done anyway. Now, if you're in a recourse state where the bank can come after you for all the rest of your assets, maybe you sell the home to just try and limit the loss if you have other money available. But if you have other money available, you probably didn't put 3.5% down. So you're walking away from that home, and now the bank owns that home. You put 3.5% down. Now, this is where that private mortgage insurance is going to pay off for the bank. And that's why they require that you have it under 20%. Because the bank goes to sell the home. Let's just say they want to get rid of it as soon as possible. So they don't like non-performing assets on their books. And that's a whole nother discussion about capital requirements in banks that I'm not going to get into right now, but they don't like having it on their books. So what are they going to do? Sell it. So they're going to hire a real estate agent and they're going to say, sell that thing as fast as possible. Well, guess what? Everybody else knows that this is a home in foreclosure. So what do you think those offers are going to be? You think you're going to get the best offers when the home's in foreclosure? Or do you think everybody else knows that's coming to buy a home in foreclosure that the bank wants to get rid of it quickly and they might be able to get a better deal? Yeah, everyone's going to think they can get the better deal. That's just the way that works. That's what I would do. That's the savvy thing to do. Unfortunately, for one person, they're losing their home. For the other person, it's an opportunity. And this is often the way the world works. So if you have that opportunity, you say, okay, I'll go to the bank. I'll offer you $180,000 for the home. And the bank goes, done. Let's get it done quickly. Close it as fast as possible. Again, that goes to what's the cash offer, how much you're going to put down, what's the odds of you closing the deal, and you're having that same negotiation, except for now you're having that negotiation now with a person with a bank, and the bank just wants the deal done. So even if the amount is less, if the amount of cash you're coming to the table with is more, so the deal's more likely to get done, they might take that offer instead. Versus somebody else coming again with the 3.5% down and they have to get all the financing and go through all the process. Bank wants it as fast as possible. So you come in, swoop in, done. Some people come in and literally pay cash for that house because they're investors. And they go, hey, if I just go pay that bank cash, they'll let me take that house. I can take it tomorrow. Let me just get the inspection done real quick, see if there's anything I got to work out with the bank. Boom, close, here's cash. I'll finance it later. Because remember, you can always refi. Well, if you never fi'd to begin with, which means financed, if you never financed your home to begin with, and then you just paid cash, you could still refinance that home later. As long as you have an income stream, you can get a loan. People do it all the time. So if you had to sell that home, the bank sells that home, say they get $170,000 for it, right? Plus they have to pay the real estate fee, and they're 6%. That's another, it's more money. So it's another $10,000 that they got that they don't get. So the bank ends up with $160,000 when you borrowed $193,000. Not a great deal for the bank, but that's where that private mortgage insurance pays off. And this is why you don't just buy and sell homes all the time, because that transaction fee will kill you. Even if you're a real estate agent, you're still paying the other half. You're still paying 3%. So this is why a bank wants an appraisal, because let's say that home actually appraised at $170,000, but you offered $200,000 for that home. The bank is not going to finance that for you. You're going to have to cover the difference. So you'd have to put up $30,000 in cash plus your down payment, because the bank doesn't want to end up financing more than the value of the home in case it goes south. They limit their losses, and that's what banks are best at, limiting their losses. So all of these rules are so banks can limit their losses. So the appraisal, third party, they come in, they have the offer, they come in and look at the house, and usually that appraisal comes back pretty close. What's the appraisal really based on? Right? What does the appraiser know that nobody else knows? Nothing. There's no secrets here. So the value of your home, or of any home, is typically based, first off, on what typical homes in that neighborhood are selling for. So we do this all the time. Everyone who owns a home looks around and goes, what's my neighbor? Oh, that neighbor house is for sale. What'd they sell that for? Well, if they sold theirs for this, and then we start our rationalization. But my house has this, 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 and this, which if those things are important to a buyer, that might be worth more or might be worth less, just depends. But relatively speaking, homes in the same neighborhood typically sell for around the same price per square foot. So if you have a 2,000 square foot house and homes in your neighborhood are selling for $100 a square feet, then your house is $200,000. And then on top of that, there is age of the home and finish of the home. So if somebody's redone the kitchen and bathrooms or floors and other things that are of high value, then the home might be worth more than a neighbor's home because of finish quality. So finish quality usually just adjusts the price per square foot. So if average in the neighborhood is 100, but the home you're looking at has a really high-end finish, let's say they put a Viking stove in the kitchen and granite countertops, then it might be worth more like $120 a square foot instead of $100. But it's basically going to come down to a cost per square foot average. And, a garage is obviously of lesser value than finished space inside because you can't put a person in there and rent it. More rooms that are actual rooms that have a second exit that you could rent as a room are worth more. Different things like this that make home values adjust slightly in cost per square foot. But that's basically what an appraiser is going to do. He's going to come look at the finish. He's going to look at the other homes in the neighborhood, and he's going to go, okay, based off of what other homes are selling for and based off of the finish of this home, I believe it's worth X. And the reason they're just not going to wing it is because they don't want to be responsible for that. So they're going to say, this is not my opinion, really. This is what the market is saying right now. And if prices are going up, then he has less to worry about. If prices are going down, that's when it gets a little stickier and the appraisals typically, come in a little bit lower because they're worried about being on the hook, where the bank says, wait a minute, you told me this home was worth 210, it's really worth 190. That's a problem. And then they don't become the bank's appraiser anymore. So that's the appraisal. So the appraisal is a third party's valuation of what that home is worth. And one thing to know about all of this is that this is happening thousands of times a day all across the country every day. So if this is your first time going through it, this is kind of why I did this podcast on this, is so that you can understand the process of it, the process of an appraisal and why they're getting an appraisal and what the values are, how they're coming up with this and why they're doing it. And it's basically a whole lot of cover your ass. The bank covering its ass on what the value is. It's the appraiser's actually covering his ass just using what other homes in the neighborhood have sold for. That's a lot of what this is, to make everybody feel pretty comfortable about the whole transaction. So the loan amount that you can get is based on that appraisal. So let's say you put in an offer on a home for $200,000 and the appraisal comes back at $190,000. The bank is not going to loan you $190,000 because you have to still put your down payment. So you say, oh, I have 3.5% down payment. So if I offer $200,000, that means the bank's going to let me borrow $193, but the house is worth $190, so I just have to come up with $3,000 more. No, that's not the way that this works. If you're putting 3.5% down, you're going to put down 3.5% of $190, and you have to cover the $190 to $200. Or if the home appraises for $190,000, then this is one of your outs in the contract. You go back to the homeowner, the seller, and you say, look, I know I offered you $200,000 for the house, but it appraised at $190,000. So that's all I can offer you is $190,000. That's all I can afford to offer you. And they can either accept that or say no, and the contract's done and everybody walks away. You start back over. Most of the time, homes appraise. Or the buyer is going to know that it's not going to appraise quite as much if, it's in a crazy housing market and they have to come up with the extra cash. So this is just the way that it works. But a bank isn't going to loan you more money than something is worth. And that's just typical across the board with everything. Banks aren't in the business of loaning you more than the value of something. They want you to have skin in the game, which is your down payment, so that if it goes south and you lose, you have something to lose, which means you have a reason to continue paying. After the appraisal's done. So that's negotiation part one. Renegotiation, we'll call it part one. Now, if you offer $200,000, the appraisal comes back at $205,000. The seller does not have the right to come back and go, oh, well, it's worth $205,000, so you have to increase your offer to $205,000. That's not the way that typically works. It could be written into the contract that way, but that's highly unlikely. So instead, the way that it works is specifically is you get that benefit if you're the buyer, and it appraises for more, then you go, great. So once it's appraised, if it doesn't appraise for the right amount, you can't agree with the buyer and the seller can't agree, then the contract's over, we walk away. But let's say you offer $200,000, it appraised for $201,000, which is not uncommon for the appraisal to come in really close. Next step. The next step is an inspection. And the inspection is probably the most important part of the process for you as a buyer, and especially if you're a new buyer. If you're not experienced with owning a home and understand all of the things that are in a home, right? Do you have a boiler or do you have a furnace? Do you have a hot water heater? Are all the pipes working for, do the toilets work? Does the shower work? Does the water run? Are the pipes clogged? What about the roof? Is the roof in good shape? What about the outside? Does the outside need work or is it in good shape? All of these things that are long-term repairs and maintenance expenses, those will be covered under the inspection. And in fact, the inspection is basically a review of your home from top to bottom, right? Typically they'll do a radon test if you ask for it. They bring a little machine to test that. And that depends on what area you live with and if radon's common, but usually it's like a $20 test, so it's kind of like a why not throw it in. When you do the inspection, I highly recommend. In fact, there would be no way where I wouldn't tell you to show up. You need to be there for the inspection. Unless you are a home expert, have already gone through that home on your own, and you know all the systems and what you're looking for, you need to be there. You might not even know where to look. What's the foundation of the home? What kind of shape is that in? You got termites? No termites. What's the whole of the home look like from a long-term, how long is this home going to stand? How long before I have to put lots of money into it? Basically, it's a what's broken today system. So you can learn a lot by being there for the inspection and walking through with the inspector. And it's basically your intro to, hey, this is the home I'm about to buy. Let me start learning some things about it. So, especially if you're cool with the inspector and you show up with them and you go, look, I'm here to learn. Tell me everything you need to know. And typically a good inspector will know all about the neighborhood, building materials, the quality of who put things in. These things matter a lot when it comes to you knowing what you're going to have to spend long term on your home. So they're going to detail anything safety related and any maintenance that should be done to get the home up to code. So here's an easy example for you. Say you're buying a home and it looks like it has a finished basement. Was an inspection ever done on that basement? Is that a legal basement basically? Or did the person who did it run their own electrical wiring, never had an inspection done, and that's not legal? Inspection's going to show you all of the things that a homeowner should fix before they sell the home. And if you're a savvy homeowner and you're selling, you're likely going to get an inspection done on your own and just pay for it so you can evaluate all of the things that you need to fix before you try and sell your home. But if you're a buyer, it's way more important to you to know what needs to happen with this home. Because if something's not up to code and it's not caught, you can still buy the home. But what happens when you go to sell it and they do catch it? Now all of a sudden, your home's worth less in value because there's things that you have to do to fix it to get it up to code. So they're going to look at the foundation of the home. They're going to look at, they're going to look at the walls, the roof, all of the systems inside that make your house go. They're going to check the water pressure and make sure water's coming out and draining out of all of the pipes. You can pay extra to have a plumber show up and put a camera in all of the pipes. And if you're buying into an expensive place, sometimes that's worth it. It might cost you a few $100s, but it's nice to have the peace of mind that, hey, those pipes are clean. They're not going to be clogged up for a minute. Do the toilets work? Do the appliances work if they're leaving appliances? Is the electrical panel up to code, or did they run extra circuits and have plugged things in wrong? Do the garage door openers work and work correctly? What else do I need to know about my home? How long has it been since the roof's been replaced? What kind of shape is the roof in? Because the roof could cost you a lot of money. Roofs are thousands of dollars. So if you have to do a roof replacement a year after you bought the home because you didn't pay attention to the inspection report and closed anyway, that's on you. So once you're done with the inspection, now you're at another negotiating standpoint with the seller. And what you're negotiating is, first off, what things must be fixed. So for a lender to do a FHA approved loan, then the home has to meet all of the safety inspection requirements for the FHA loan, which means that if there's major things that have to be done, then those have to be done before you can close. So let's say there's something wrong with the electrical wiring. Well, they're not going to give you a loan on that home until the electrical wiring is fixed. So it has to be fixed beforehand. So some things are mandatory that must be fixed because they basically fail inspection. And other things are, this could be a problem for you very soon. So a lot of that information is the information you get if you talk to the inspector. If you have a good relationship with that inspector and you show up with them and walk through and they, this works right now, but it should work better. It should do this. For example, you go turn on the garbage disposal in the sink. And if it sounds like, he goes, yeah, well, it's still technically functionally working, but it needs to be replaced. All right, well, that's something you go back and negotiate. Like, am I going to replace that later, or does that have to replace now? If it's an electrical problem, if it's a safety issue, if it's like the roof, anything structural that's a problem, those typically have to be fixed before you can close. So you go back and you say, okay, here's all of the problems found during an inspection. There's a certain number of things that have to happen, and then there's going to be this probably bigger chunk typically where you go, all right, so the roof has another 2 years on it. So if the roof has 2 years and that's going to cost me $7,000, all right, I want $5,000 credit at closing, or I'm not going to pay the $200,000 because the home's not worth $200,000. It's worth $195 because it needs a new roof in a couple of years, and that's going to cost $5,000. And you can renegotiate this with 100. Now, the buyer may say, I don't care. I have another offer, so get out of here. Next. Fine, cancel that contract. Here comes the next guy. But typically, most of the things found in inspection, it's like, okay, now I as the seller know, and you as the buyer know. So these things need to happen anyway, and you work it out. And then you figure out, okay, how much is this each going to cost? And if it's major things, then it may take a long time to finish, in which case then you go extend your contract if everyone still agrees. So the idea is you put an offer on a home, you assume everything works. The appraisal says it's worth the right value. The inspection shows what doesn't work that's supposed to work. And this could be a small things to very big things. I'll tell you a story that happened to me. Closed on my home. I drive up to the home right after getting the keys from the title at the title office from the seller. And I walk out to the hot tub, and the hot tub doesn't work. There's no heat coming out of it. So I called the guy I just bought the home from, and I said, hey man, how come the hot tub doesn't work? He goes, oh yeah, well I think the heating element broke in it. But I put a space heater in there so the pipes won't freeze. And I had two thoughts at the moment. One, I was super pissed because I just paid a bunch of money for this house and the dude could have fixed it. It cost me $200 to get that fixed. It wasn't a huge deal. But I was somewhat just disappointed with him that he didn't spend the $200 and fix it. But B, had he not put the space heater in there, all of the pipes of the hot tub could have froze. And now basically I have a useless hot tub that I have to replace that might cost me thousands of dollars. So what's the value of that hot tub when attached to the home? I don't know. Probably wasn't worth a lot from the inspection point of view. But it's something that if I want and have to replace, because it's not a mandatory item. It's not like the house doesn't work if the hot tub's not functioning. You could mothball the hot tub, right? You could fill in your pool with dirt and you don't need it. It's not required for the toilets in the house to flush. But if it's something that you want and it's important to you, then it can be an issue. So I say that because the inspector is going to walk you through, hopefully, all of the things of your house. So if you've got, and the main things you want to worry about, the roof's a huge one. Your heating and air conditioning system is a huge one. Okay, how old is that furnace, or how old is that water heater? And how long do those things usually last? So when am I going to have to replace them? And if you walk into a home that's 15, 20 years old and it's had no updates done to it, well, you're going to end up replacing all of those things. You're going to end up replacing that furnace. You're going to end up replacing that water heater. Those things are expensive, right? And time consuming for you to deal with it, and the headache of dealing with it. And this is why fix and flippers, a lot of what they're doing is going in and looking at all these things that nobody really wants to deal with and going, let's just upgrade all of them. Put in a new furnace, put in a new water heater, put in a new chandelier, put on a fresh coat of paint. All of the sort of maintenance things that someone may not want to do, they'll come in and do. And people value that because their life isn't interrupted by it. They don't have to play general contractor for it. So there's value added in that. So go through your inspection, and then you're going to have another negotiation with the seller. And hopefully you come to an agreement on what they're going to do and what you're going to do. And that also, for me, the inspection list on my house was, okay, I understand all these things that need to be fixed. And we still wanted to get to close soon. So I said, okay, well, here's the discount on the home price for me to do all of these things. And that could be a point where you go, hey, it's going to cost me I'm paying $200,000 for this house, but it's got $20,000 of necessary maintenance over the next 2 years. I'll offer you $185 now because I don't have to put money into all of those things. And the buyer may say no and walk away, or he may say yes because he knows those need to get done. So is the real negotiation happens after that inspection. However, if there's a bunch of people lined up to buy that house and you say no and turn it down, then the next couple is going to come by and just buy it anyway and pay the extra and not fight over it. Oh, those are deferred maintenance costs. Okay. So again, this depends on how hot the market is, on how much you can negotiate. But the inspection gives you the list of here's everything I know I'm going to have to fix. And should I reduce the price and get value for that? All right, so understanding your mortgage payment costs. So now you're going to close, and then you're going to get your first mortgage bill, which actually you're going to get a free month of rent. They don't charge you the first month because that's the total amount of the loan and the highest interest they'll ever receive. So principal, that's how much you owe on the home. So if you can make extra payments to the principal, even one per year, can turn a 30-year mortgage into a 17-year mortgage. So principal payments, the first couple years, usually you're hardly paying anything towards principal. Almost all goes to interest. Taxes, insurance, private mortgage insurance, if you put down less than, normally it's 20%. Some of that's negotiable with like a 15% sometimes. Depends on your credit. Taxes and insurance. So if taxes and insurance go up, then guess what? Your monthly payment goes up. And here's almost guarantee. I will almost guarantee you that when you buy that home, your taxes will go up because tax rates are really not normally at true fair market value. If you've owned a home for a long time, in some states like California, they're fixed. So as long as you own the home, they can't increase your property taxes. Well, I'm sure they'll repeal that soon, but the idea is that if you're old and on fixed income, you don't get kicked out of your house just because your property taxes went up and you can't afford it. But if your property taxes go up, if your insurance goes up, those are typically part of the payment that you're going to make to your mortgage provider. So that could make your payment increase. And just know that the taxes probably will because you just paid for the home and now that is the value of the home. As it goes up in value, your taxes usually won't rise as much, but when that home is sold, taxes go up because the assessed value becomes the one that someone just paid for it, not an estimate of what they might be able to sell it at. And you're going to pay interest, and that, again, depends on your rate. So back to credit, and man, take care of your credit because here's why. On a $300,000 house at 4% interest, if you just make the regular payments for 30 years, your total interest is going to be $215,000. At 5% interest, $279,000. At 6% interest, over $347,000. Now you're paying more in interest than you're going to pay for your home. And honestly, a 6% rate is still historically a cheap rate. But now rates are so historically low that it matters even more, like the amount of money you can save. And that just shows you what each point of interest will do. And that's the importance of your credit score. So now you know what's included in your mortgage payment. Included in your mortgage payment, the interest on the loan, taxes, insurance, private mortgage insurance if you have it, and then the principal amount. A couple things that I want you to think about in sort of the wrap-up of this. First, when you buy a home, your credit score is going to go down. It's pretty basic on why that happens, because your credit score is based off, a part of it is based off of how much credit you have available versus how much you've used. Well, when you buy a home, the whole amount of the home that you borrowed is your amount borrowed, and you've used 100% of that. So the ratio of that drops your credit score. It'll usually rebound, but it'll take a little bit. So just know that. So before you close on that home, if you needed to get a new credit card, if you wanted to do something else that was credit related, buying a car, for an example, might be one of the things. Oftentimes it's better to do that before. Now, if you go buy a car, you're going to end up with the same scenario. When you buy the car, your credit score is going to go down right after you buy the car, for the exact same reason that it'll go down right after you buy the house, because the amount of credit you're using versus the amount available is 100%. And then as that margin changes, and the weird thing is they don't build in a down payment. So, you would think that if I was looking at someone holistically from a credit perspective, and let's just say you bought a $200,000 house and you put 20% down, well, you have equity in that house because you just put it down. Your loan is $160,000, but from a credit perspective, you're using 100% of that, even though you still have equity in the home. It's the same thing with cars. You put let's say you go buy a $20,000 car and you put $10,000 down, you borrow $10,000, it's still going to hit your credit negatively because the amount you requested, the 10, is 100% of what you currently borrow, which is 10. So there's almost this weird thing where you should borrow $20,000 for your car, even if you have the $10,000, and then pay some of that down immediately, and then that would change the value. But these are games within the credit score game, and I just want you to be aware that this will impact your credit, and that's why. The second thing is this is just kind of a personal pet peeve of mine, because the way people talk. And we like to say when we close, I see this all the time on Facebook. Someone closes on their home, shows a picture of the keys, picture of the house. I'm a homeowner today. Yes and no. We like to say that. Sounds good. You go buy a car, you like to say the same thing. That's my car. I bought it. But until it's 100% paid for, it doesn't belong to you. It still belongs to the bank, and you have a right to use it as long as you keep making payments. Your house is the same way. Don't make payments on your car for a couple months. See what happens. It'll disappear because they'll come pick it up because you don't own it. Same thing will happen with your house. You miss a few payments, they'll kick you out. They will foreclose on that house. So just from a mental construct perspective of food for thought, I tell people all the time, when they come visit me, they're like, oh, hey, we really like your house. I go, that's great. It's not mine. The bank owns it. As long as I keep making payments, they let me keep staying here. And I intend to keep making payments. And one day, I expect it will be mine. But when you've paid off your house, when you've paid off your car, then say you own it. Until then, just have a little honesty on it. You don't own it yet. In fact, you're leveraged in it, which hopefully will end up being a very good thing for you. That's how most families build wealth. The last piece of advice, regardless of what debt it is, try and make a little bit extra, whether it's once a month, once a year, any just little $100 here, $100 there. Make extra payments. Now, that's not necessarily the most financially savvy thing to do. And once you've got your loan to value below 50%, kind of don't have to worry about it. If your interest rate is low and you're making more money in the market, then maybe you should invest in the market instead of put it towards your home or car. I like the sprinkle approach. Sprinkle a little extra payment here, a little extra payment there. Most of the money goes into the investments. But if your investments are returning more than the interest rate, then you're making the difference. But there's that sense of security that everybody seems to like of having less debt. And the other thing is you can treat it like your savings account. So if you make extra payments towards your mortgage, and then all of a sudden you need to miss a month, well, now you're not really missing it because you made the extra payments. So just as something to think about, maybe you want to make a little bit extra payment here and there. I try and do that on all my loans, either that or shrink the period. So you'll start, if you're a first-time home buyer with a 30-year mortgage, maybe 5 to 7 years into it, you might look at, depending on rates, you may look at refinancing that. And if, let's say, all things were equal to today, you might decide, hey, I'm 7 years into this, I could refinance it. Drop my interest rate by a percentage point, only increase my payment a couple $100 a month and put that on a 15-year instead of maybe I would have been on another 22 years. And that way you have a lower interest rate, which means you're paying less in interest, a slightly higher payment, but one that you might be able to afford 5 to 7 years down the road. So little things like that help you get one step closer to owning your own home for real, which is the spot we really all want to be in. If we're going to set up for retirement, it's nice not to have a home payment. And if you've cut out the biggest payment in your life, which is typically rent, then you're a long way into a very happy retirement. So hope this is helpful for anyone buying a home, that this is the steps you're going to go through. This is what you can kind of expect. And best of luck out there. Thanks for listening. Catch you guys next time.